What is up, players? How are we doing tonight? I am Salty Mike, as those of you who follow me know. I like to do deck builds and I like to play Commander. Commander is my favorite thing ever. So tonight I'm actually going to be giving you guys a look into my build for the first deck that I ever made. And I'm going to caveat this with it's my first deck. This being that it's gone through several iterations. In fact, this deck has actually gained a color and is totally different commanders than what I actually started with, but some of the core creatures that are in this deck have actually been there since I've built the deck initially, so that's why I still caveat it as my first deck that I've ever built. Um, the It is a ton of fun. It is a little bit slower. Last week, if you were here for my Sliver Decksplaination, that deck is extremely optimized. It's very efficient at what it does. This deck it's fun and it's a little bit slower, but it does increase in value extremely quickly. In fact, my play group that I've had for years, they dreaded whenever I pulled out the Bant deck because I would be kind of slow in the beginning, but once I started gaining some steam, it was really hard to stop me. So, and that's kind of what this deck does. It really sneaks up on people, and that's kind of why I like it. Also, the fact that I can do so much with it. The thing that does get confusing though is the amount of triggers that I have sometimes, which I did purposefully build the deck this way so that way I trigger one thing and it trigger all the way down. Um, so you'll see kind of how that is because it's kind of like, I'll gain a life. Well, that puts a +1/+1 counter on something, that allows me to draw a card. When I draw a card, I can put a land into play, and then that triggers something else, and you see how that snowballs out of control really fast. And that's exactly why I like this deck, and when I finally settled on this is the style of deck that I wanted to go for, I think it's actually turned out pretty well. So, without further ado, let's actually get into the deck. Deck build display here. Okay. So, the deck we're starting with here, I'm going to go over the partners first. So we have Ishai, Ojutai Dragon Speaker. Once again, what's up, Kamikaze? Uh, so, once again, this deck, being that it has partner commanders, I do love partner commanders. I think it makes your decks a little bit more versatile, and it kind of gives you having access to a second card in the command zone. I think is extremely powerful. Um, Ishai on his own though is pretty powerful. Ishai Ojutai Dragon Speaker is 2 and a white and a blue for a bird monk, 1/1 with flying. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Ishai Ojutai Dragon Speaker, and then of course he has partner. This gets out of control fast. Ishai, when I put him down around the table, even if like I get him out early and my other opponents are ramping, that's at least one spell a turn. If I have a 4 player pod or a 5 player pod, he's already a 4/4 or a 5/5 coming into turn 2, which that's makes him extremely dangerous, and he gets really big really fast. The other partner that we've gotten here is Kodama of the East Tree. And Kodama of the East Tree is a 4 green green spirit 6/6 with reach. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put into the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with lesser or with equal, or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield, and of course it also has partner. Now, you guys seeing this channel know me long enough that I'm Johnny Combo Player. Kodama of the East Tree is most definitely a combo piece. However, this deck, like I said, it's more fun. There are two tutors, if you can call them that. I mean, they definitely search your library, but one card in here does specifically tutor, but it grabs a land rather than actually tutors for like a creature. And then the other card that does actually search for a creature is actually mainly in here for recursion, to put cards back in from the graveyard into my library, rather than, but it also has a tutor function attached. And we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, let's go on to the stats. So you'll see here, I have 33 lands, 31 creatures, 7 artifacts, 10 instants, 9 sorceries, and... Oh, oh, jeez, man, this pollen around here in Virginia is getting to me. All right, and we got 10 others, which you know what that means. That for whatever reason, deck builder decides to lump the enchantments and the planeswalkers together. I can never really figure out why they don't just separate them. Maybe they just haven't had enough feedback to say so, but whatever. In any case, you'll see down here, you see the converted mana cost is 3.34, which again is a little bit higher than we normally like for my other decks that are very, that are much more focused. They're very efficient at what they do. But again, this deck is a little bit more fun. Plus, we have a lot of ramp in this deck, so it's not that bad, really. All things considered, we're able to play out our spells as needed. We have a whopping 51 green mana symbols. If you couldn't tell, green is important. And then we have 20 blue, 24 white, and 1 X mana symbol in our deck. The 24 white, strangely enough, is not going to be as important as the 20 blue, and that's because like how green, I kind of measure this in importance for your deck, right? You need to be able to have mana in order to cast your spells. In order to get to more mana, you need to be able to draw cards. So that's why I always, in a deck that has green or blue or both, I will always prioritize those two colors first in order to be able to play out the rest of the deck. So we've got, so even though we have 24 and 20 blue, 24 white and 20 blue, they're very even. So we can kind of, if we have the basic lands that we want to do it, we can kind of slant it in the favor of blue still and be okay. However, I do believe I actually have an even amount of each of the basic lands here. Yeah, I've got 2 islands, 2 basics. Oh, I got 4 forests in this build? But my physical cards, I only have 2. I'm wondering if this is an... What is this iteration missing? It has Yavimaya. It has a forest. Huh. This iteration is missing a couple of lands, or... You know what? I'm not seeing Fabled Passage in here. So that's an upgrade that I did pretty recently. So let's put that in there. Oh. That does look cool, but that's not the version I have. I have the M21. I have a foily M21, actually. So we'll take out 1 forest for that. And then, what else did we add? What else did we add? Let's see. Now I gotta go through this one at a time and make sure what I got. Okay, so I've got Bounce Land, Azorius Chancery. I've got Selesnya Sanctuary and Simic Growth. So those 3 are in there. That cycle's in there. You know what it's missing? This one is missing the Spara's Headquarters, which, given that is a pretty recent add, so I just got my pre-orders in actually the same day that my wife had the decks come in. The precons for New Capenna came in. My New Capenna pre-orders came in, which was lots of copies of the Tri-lands, because I'm not going to make the mistake this time of getting them the Ikoria Tri-lands. They're more expensive now. Actually, some of them have doubled in price. It's craziness out there with these card prices. So especially now with the other set of Tri-lands coming out. Okay, so let's see. I think that's probably what happened, is that I needed to take out a forest here, and we need to put in Spar's headquarters, and then we should be up to speed as far as our lands are concerned. All right. Yeah. Because, actually, I'm going to count them out real quick right now. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Oh, fun. So 32, which means there's a ramp spell in here. So glad I'm so prepared for my my deck cast here. Okay, okay, we do have a Lotus Cobra. Okay. I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to just go through here, and since I have the physical deck here, maybe we'll figure out which ones that I'm missing. Okay, so right now, currently, like I said, the spread is that we've got 2 of each of the basic lands, and we have also the Yavimaya in here. Now, Yavimaya itself doesn't count as a forest, but when it's in the battlefield, it will make each land a forest in addition to the other types. This is to kind of round out my lands and make sure that I can tap for green as much as possible. Obviously, as you saw, we have 51 green mana symbols in here, so it's kind of important that we have access to green all the time. And in this case, Yavimaya takes up the slot of a utility land. There's in 3 colors, it becomes more difficult as to which cards you need to put in as your utility lands, because you begin to become more invested in making sure that you're hitting your colors. Whereas, yeah, Yavimaya is OP. It can be. In this deck, it is just something that rounds out. But in other decks that, like, say, Lord Windgrace, where you can create a buttload of tokens that have Forest Walk, yes, totally agree. Yes, 100%. The next set of lands here, I do have a cycle of the shock lands. So we have Breeding Pool, right? Enters tapped unless you pay 2 life. We always pay the 2 life, so that way it comes in. Then we got the same thing with Hollow Fountain, the Plains Island, and we also have Temple Garden, the older version of Temple Garden. Then we have Canopy Vista. I took great care in making sure with this deck that I got the land subtypes on here, because I do have cards in here that care specifically about being able to reach for lands as part of the value engine that this starts to churn out. So it's very important to be able to hit those, and as long as I can get them to enter untapped as many times as possible, that's what I'm going to do. So we also have Prairie Stream as well, which is basically the same thing except it's Plains Island, right? I do hope that sometime in the future that they do come up with one like this that does, because they have a land that's kind of like this. Okay, so they have the Rimewood Falls, and actually the Rimewood Falls I actually took out of this, so this is probably the land that we need to take out, because now I'm down to 32 lands. Because I actually, in my physical build, I actually took out the Rimewood Falls to put in the Spara's headquarters because it also enters tapped. Dreamroot Cascade is the one that I was thinking of, though. So yeah, it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. Now, given unlike the Prairie Stream where it comes in, you have to have 2 basic lands. The Dreamroot Cascade it's a little bit easier, so that way it comes in untapped, but it doesn't have those land subtypes. And I'm really hoping that at some point in the future they actually do finish out that cycle of, because I mean this cycle is completed, right? I think they did all of these between the Innistrad, the newest Innistrad set, or I should say block, right? Because there's actually 2 sets, but they're in the same in the same plane. So we had the Midnight Hunt had like the first run of these, and then we had the Crimson Vow, which is where this one's from. That did the other half of them. And I really hope that I'm sure Wizards has gotten feedback for that at some point, somehow or a way, and you know, however they decide to do things over there, they're getting around to it. I'm sure it's just, I guess they haven't found the right time to do it, which I would have figured that the right time to do it would have been like, I don't know, Strixhaven, you know. But hey, that's neither here nor there. I don't make the big decisions over there. The next things that we got is Scattered Groves. So Scattered Groves, and we also have Irrigated Farmland, which are basically the same thing. Again, they have the land subtypes that we're going to have access to. They do enter tapped, but you know, where we can live with it, and they have cycling. So if we already have a whole bunch of land, we don't really have to worry about it. We can cycle it away for 2, and we can get a card out of it. So, you know, it serves as either a cantrip or an extra land. I'll take it. So we talked about Dreamroot Cascade already. The next one in order we've got is Hinterland Harbor, which is kind of cool. So it enters tapped unless we control a forest or island. This one's a little bit easier, and I've got the whole cycle of this one too. So we've got Sun Petal Grove over here, Forest or Plains, right? And then we've got Glacial Fortress, which is up here somewhere. Here we go. Glacial Fortress. Okay. Same. All right. All color lands, we of course have to go with a command tower. And yes, because we have both partner commanders, yes, this will count for all 3 of our colors that we are using. Exotic Orchard is the... Exotic Orchard, if you have 3 colors or more in your deck, just put it in there. You'll like, somebody at the table is going to have at least one of your colors. You might as well put Exotic Orchard in there. Treva's Ruins is the next one. Treva's Ruins is a land layer. When it comes into play, you sacrifice it unless you return a non-layer land you control to its owner's hand. So the nice thing about this is that it doesn't enter tapped. Yes, you do have to bounce a land back to your hand, but we do have some landfall triggers in this deck, so it's actually okay to do that. Not that this is completely centered around land, but being able to have those land triggers, kind of nice. Landfall triggers are nice, and we can tap that land, still get a mana out of it, then bounce that land to play Treva's Ruins, and then use Treva's Ruins immediately. So I don't knock it. I do think that this cycle of lands is actually pretty good. It's not. I mean, it's not like another command tower, but I mean, it's decent for what we need to do. And then, of course, we got Spara's Headquarters. Spara's Headquarters is the Tri-land in our colors from New Capenna. Has the cycling. Probably not going to use the cycling part, to be honest. Probably always going to try to tutor for this land first if we can. And then it'll enter tapped, and then after that we just use it for the rest of the game. Next is Seaside Citadel, which is the lesser version of Spara's Headquarters. It taps for all of our colors. It just enters tapped. We talked about Yavimaya already. Reliquary Tower. So we do, because we incur so much value, no maximum hand size is actually kind of important in this deck. And if I'm not mistaken, I have 4 cards in here that say no maximum hand size on it, just to make sure. The funny thing, though, is what I'll get is when I have decks that do care about having no maximum hand size, is I'll always draw Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel together. It's almost inevitable. Almost every single time. Like, if it's not in my starting hand, like, I draw one of those 2 next to start my turn for the game. It almost happens every time. The next set of lands that I've got is the bounce lands that are in our colors. So you saw them earlier as I was kind of going through which ones I had. Azorius Chancery, and then we got Cynic Growth Chamber and Selesnya Sanctuary. These lands are important because we do have the combo, like I said, with Kodama. With Kodama, what we need to do is... I appreciate the follow, Broham. Even though it says you followed me 2 days ago, now it says you follow me now, so I'm confused at that. But I do appreciate the follow. I'll always appreciate the follows, man. Super, super awesome. Um, the what was I saying? Oh yeah, bounce lands. So, with Kodama, in order for the triggers to happen with Kodama, let's go back up here to Kodama to read him real quick. So, Kodama. Weird. I agree. I don't know. That's just what it has in my activity feed, though. So Kodama, right? Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with that ability, you put another permanent card, right? That squirrel moment, though. You know me by now. Like, I have squirrel moments all the time. So the bounce lands are perfect in this case because I can play the bounce land and then the trigger off of the bounce land and Kodama's trigger go on the stack, and then I can order them the way I need to. The way that this goes infinite, right, or until I decide to stop it, is when I have something that makes like another token in addition to the bounce land coming into play. And with that also, because the bounce land just has you bounce a land back to your hand, you can choose to bounce the bounce land back to your hand off of its own ability. That's how that works, and I'll show you what the payoffs are with our landfall triggers for that later. But that's why the bounce lands are in the deck. Typically, I don't use bounce lands. I have found that they do put me behind in decks that I had in the past, but now when I have decks that do actually care about land triggers, they're the greatest lands that you can put in there. Particularly for this deck and my 5-color like group hug deck that turns into a lands matter deck. But yeah, like most other decks I do tend to avoid using the bounce lands. Then our next suite of lands, we have 5 Fetchlands. Not like OG Fetchlands or anything, but we got some budget Fetchlands here. We got Fabled Passage. Fabled Passage is a great one. Gets us a basic, and then if we have 4 lands, we get to untap it, which is always good. Then we got Bant Panorama, obviously, because it's in our colors, and we can use it. Then we've got Grasslands. Grasslands comes into play taps, but then we get a Forest or Plains card, which is nice. And the same thing with Floodplain, right up here. Same thing, except it's a Plains or Island card. So, right, the first thing I'm probably going to do if I get one of these two in my starting hand, I'm putting the Floodplain out, and then the very next turn I'm getting the Spar's Headquarters, so that way I already have all my colors online. Then Krosan Verge. Krosan Verge is great. It also enters tapped, but it taps for a colorless, and then we can pay 2 into it to get a Forest and a Plains card, so in a way it actually ramps us by sacrificing 1 land, we get 2. So then the next turn we'll have access to even more that we need. So like even if I were to play this on each turn just that way, by turn 4, I would have up to 5 lands potentially, and then hopefully I would also have some ramp, so I'd have even more, some ramp pieces actually on the board, like creatures or whatever. So I would have some more. Okay, so now let's get to our ramp package. Ramp package. We have pretty significant amount of cards in here that do ramp. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We got 16 ramp cards in here. And we even have some other cards that actually do a little bit extra. So like even though I don't count them in my ramp slot, I do count them in my value slot. So but regardless, we're still getting lands. So first and foremost is Sol Ring. Obviously every commander deck should have a Sol Ring in it. The next one is Noble Hierarch. Noble Hierarch is awesome. It got for $15? $15 on average for Noble Hierarch. This now, given this is also due to the fact that it's been reprinted, and there are now several iterations of Noble Hierarch out there. But I remember this card used to be a $40 card. It was super hard to get a hold of, and I was really glad that I got mine in my let's see, this one is Ultimate Masters, because that's the double Masters is the set symbol for that you see on the screen. Yeah, yes, exactly. Thank God they reprinted it. They reprinted it twice, And so that's been good. It drives the price down a little bit, gives a little bit more accessibility. And especially, and this is actually a good time for it too, is with these new Capenna cards that just came out. They got the Broker's deck that just came out, and then you can also put Spare himself as a commander. He's actually pretty decent for a commander, honestly. And then Noble Hierarch fits right into that deck. So the next one is Arcane Signet. Same thing. Every commander deck should have an Arcane Signet. Taps for every color in your commander identity. Then we've got Thought Vessel. Thought Vessel. So this one I told you again. It taps for a colorless, right? But it's a 2 cost mana rock, so it's super easy to put out, and we have no maximum hand size. The next one is Liquid Metal Torque. Now, Liquid Metal Torque is a goofy one, but it is a good one in this particular case because I do have Planeswalkers in this deck. So what we will do is, if I'm not going to use Liquid Metal Torque for the mana, is that I will have it become an artifact in addition, and as one of my other value pieces that I keep in this deck, I will use Vorel of the Wholeclade to actually double the amount of counters on that permanent. More often than not, I'm trying to get Cameo to ult really quick, and that's exactly how I can do it. So we'll get to Cameo in a little bit, but it's the Bant Cameo. Going back to... Yeah, so before, too, like, I'm super glad that they printed Liquid Metal Torque, because before, I had to have that as 2 separate cards, where I had another ramp spell in here, and then I had to have Liquid Metal Coating as that card that did that, and so I'm super glad that they, even though the power creep is real, I mean, I'll gladly accept the power creep if they're going to print it, so... The next ramp spell that we've got is 3 Visits. 3 Visits is great. 1 and a green to search library for a forest card, right? Doesn't have to be basic. It's perfect for what we need. And then same thing with Nature's Lore. It's basically an effective reprint, except it has a different name. Next thing is Whisper of the Wilds. So Whisper of the Wilds is 1 and a green for a 0/2 human shaman. Taps for a green. And then it has Ferocious, which means we can put 2 green into our mana pool if we have a creature with 4 or greater. One of our commanders innately has 6/6, so we're already good there. And then Ishai can build really quickly, especially since his own ability is not the only way that we put +1/+1 counters on our commander. We have other ways of doing that. So it's very easy to get Whisper of the Wilds to get to that point. We also, as a effective reprint and slightly better, we have Elysian Caryatid, which basically does the same thing. It just doesn't say Ferocious on it, and it taps for a mana of any color. And then we can add for 2 mana of any 1 color if we have a creature with power 4 or greater. The next one we've got is Incubation Druid, and again, we have multiple ways of putting +1/+1 counters on creatures, not just the adapt. So we can put 1 onto Incubation Druid for relatively cheap, getting around the 5 mana it will take to adapt Incubation Druid. And then we can make any mana of any color of a land that we can produce. So kind of important that we have all of our colors online before we get Incubation Druid out there, but this deck is pretty effective at doing that. The next one is Lotus Cobra. So this is why a lot of the tap lands in this deck I don't really care about, because Lotus Cobra allows us to still get the mana for the land entering the battlefield. Though it doesn't untap it, and in other decks I do make it a point to have other cards that help untap that. In this deck, I'm not trying to be super fast, I just want to build up my board over time. So Lotus Cobra is a great way of doing that, and also Lotus Cobra can potentially work into our Kodama combo, going into one of our other payoffs that we got in this deck. The next piece of ramp that we've got, where's my artifacts? Here we go. Chromatic Lantern. Perfect. Chromatic Lantern, 3 mana to fix all of our colors. All of our lands have now all the colors that we need, and it itself also taps for any mana. 3 mana feels inefficient for some people out there. For me, it works great every time. I don't know why people take it out of their deck, to be honest, but to each their own. I will keep Chromatic Lantern in every deck that is 3 or greater that I have, because it does its job very well. The next piece of ramp we've got is Kodama's Reach. Very keenly named there. So we've searched the library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one into the battlefield tapped and the other into my hand. And Cultivate is, again, effective reprint because it has the same ability but a different name. And then we've got Rishkar, Pima Renegade. So we've got 2 and a green. For when Rishkar enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on up to each of 2 target creatures. Typically, we will choose him and our commander, Ishai. And then each creature can tap for a green mana as long as it has a counter on it. And then the last piece of... I call it a ramp piece, but really it's just a big beat stick that just gives us win more mana. Nyxbloom Ancient. Nyxbloom Ancient is my big stompy green guy in this deck. I absolutely love it because it gives us 3 mana for each time we tap a permanent for mana. It's amazing. So 4 green, green, green. It is expensive to get down, but this deck is pretty effective at ramping and with all the triggers that we got, sometimes we can even cheat it out into play. So we got 7 mana for a 5/5 enchantment creature elemental. I don't like that it's also an enchantment, but I get it. In Theros, like you have enchantment creatures, it is a thing that's there. Plus, with an ability that's as crazy as this one, it gives it more susceptibility to removal. So there is that, but we have taken that into account. We have ways to protect our stuff for sure in here. But we're not going to get to that just yet. We're going to go into our card draw package first. So, you guys know that if you've followed this within the past couple of weeks, you know that I like to stick pretty close to 6 cantrips, 4 mass card draw, and then fill in the rest with the trigger card draw of some sort, up to about 16 cards. I feel like 16 is a really good number for making sure that we can effectively churn through our deck and get to the pieces that we need, or move the pieces out of the way that we don't. So in this deck, though, it's a little bit different. I only have 5 of what I would consider cantrips, and I only have 2 of what I would consider mass draw spells, but we have a lot of cards that help us draw pieces into our hand, given the value that we are churning out. So the first thing, we got Preordain, pretty simple. 1 blue mana for a Scry 2, then draw a card. Same thing with Opt, we got Scry 1, draw a card. This particular version of Opt is actually not in this deck. I have another version, but I do have that version in another deck. The next thing we got is Impulse. Where'd it go? Impulse. Oh, I guess Impulse is the one that I was missing, so that's good to know. Cool. Impulse. Cool. Doop. Alright, now we've got our 100 cards. And we can take you out of the sideboard. Alright, cool. So, we've got Impulse as another cantrip. It's a great cantrip. We look at the top 4 cards of our library. Then we put the rest, put 1 into our hand, put the rest on the bottom in any order. The next one I've got is Coiling Oracle, and it's kind of cool. I like that it's a snake elf druid. I like things that I don't know why. I just like creatures that are super weird like that, where they have like 3 different creature types on them. It's a blue and a green, so it's a little bit hard to cast, because it has 2 specific colors of mana. And when it enters the battlefield, we reveal the top card of our library. If it's a land card, we put it straight into the battlefield. Otherwise, we put the card into our hand. It's okay. It does what it needs to do. If nothing else, it does draw us a card, which is exactly what we need. And even better, if it's a land, it comes straight in play. The next one that we've got is Court Hussar. I think that's how you pronounce that. Court Hussar is a little bit is one more mana than I'd like, but for now I'll deal with it. It's 2 and a blue for a 1/3 Vidalcan Knight Vigilance. Then when it enters the battlefield, we look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of them to our hand, the rest go on the bottom, and then we sacrifice it unless we have spent white to cast it. More than likely we will have spent white to cast it, so we don't have to sacrifice it. Okay, so for our mass draw spells, we've got two mass draw spells. And that is Rishkar's Expertise. For obvious reasons, we are more than likely going to have one of our commanders out, and one of our commanders is going to be pretty beefy. Even if it's just Kodama and he has no counters on him, we can draw up to 6 cards for 6 mana and cast something for 5 or with 5 CMC or less for free. That's decent. I'll take it. And then we have Return of the Wild Speaker, which is an all-star. I think it's like become one of my new favorite cards for mass green card draw. We've got 4 and a green for an instant. Choose one. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. And then non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 to own a turn. I don't typically use that last part unless, I mean, I could if I wanted to end the game just to beef up my creatures. And if I knew I was in a position that I could do that. But more often than not, I'm using that first part where I just want to draw a bunch of cards. Okay, and then the next thing we got is the other like card draw like off of triggers and stuff. So first thing, we got a cool one from the D&D set called Wizard Class. This is another one that gives us no maximum hand size from the start. Then we can upgrade it to 2 and a blue. We do have to pay that mana to get it to level 2. And then when this class becomes level 2, we draw 2 cards. So, I mean, it's kind of a cantrip in that sense. And then we pay 4 and a blue to get it to level 3. And then this is when it really goes kind of insane. Whenever we draw a card, we put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature we control. And that really helps go into our value engine that we're trying to churn. The next one is Cameo, the Field Researcher. This is the Bant one. So Cameo, the Field Researcher, 1 and Bant. For Planeswalker, +1, choose up to 2 target creatures until your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you draw a card. The cool thing about this particular Cameo is that you don't have to choose your own creatures. You can choose your opponent's creatures, and if they swing in, you still get to draw a card. So that's, to me, that's super cool. And I actually use that part quite often because if I know another player is actually super aggressive and I need them to draw cards, I'll actually kind of negotiate a deal where, hey, I'll give you I need to draw a card, so I'll let you swing into me for some chip damage as long as I can draw cards off of it. Now given, right, you make your deals with caution, but typically it does end up being in my favor. The -2, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. That's a good one. I don't use it that often, but I can, and I like that I have the option to. And then the -7 is really what we're trying to get off. So that's why what I was talking about earlier, how we kind of combo the Liquid Metal Torque with Vorel of the Holoclade. So we want to she'll enter the battlefield. Then we want to pay the extra mana to turn her into an artifact, and then double the loyalty counters that's on Cameo, and then we will get to pop off her ultimate immediately, and we'll get to draw 3 cards, and we get the emblem that's basically Omniscience on an emblem, so then we can cast our cards for free forever, and that's just going to just completely make our deck explode, because we can play everything for free, and whenever things enter, we're going to trigger a whole bunch of things anyhow. Next on our card draw list here is Tatiova, Benthic Druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Hopefully Tatiova isn't on the battlefield when we go infinite with Kodama. Otherwise, we will just deck ourselves. And hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's possible. It could happen. The next one I've got is Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. We've got 3 blue for +1, scry 1, then draw a card. Pretty simple. -2, return target creature to owner's hand. I do like that I have the at least access to be able to bounce stuff back just in case. Not just for removing my opponent's stuff, but getting additional value out of my own stuff. And then -8, which is the super cool one, but I don't typically get this off. But hey, I'm gonna try, right? So if I get if I'm able to pop it off, then I'll get an emblem with whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. That's just gonna make it way harder for my opponents to be able to do anything to me. Because I already am gonna, because at some point I am gonna have a crazy board state with it. Oh, dude, thank you for the raid. Super appreciate it. I hope the last part of your stream went well. So if you don't know Codename Red is typically he does like Pokemon streamer, but he's a variety streamer and he does like retro gaming. Recently, what he's been doing on one of his days, he's been doing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of Roses game, which is actually super fun. It's really nostalgic. I love playing that game when I was little. It did not. I got beat by Bakura. Well, I mean, Bakura's pretty evil. I mean, he is a main antagonist, you know. So I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he was not nice to you. Though I'm pretty sure in the game he doesn't have nearly the craziness of the cards that he's got when he's in like the final season of Yu-Gi-Oh. I mean, this like oh, what is it called now? I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. Is that how that's pronounced, Bakura? Well, he didn't spell it correctly, but oh no, he did spell it correctly. Yes, Bakura is how or well, at least that's how they said it in English, right? It's probably like Bakura. It's probably that's how you actually say it. But he is a good guy in here, not Ring, and he has plenty. Well, that's true because he actually didn't get the Millennium Ring, and like until like towards the end of the first season, or while he was. Yeah, it's like towards the end of the first season while they were on the island with Pegasus, which that might even be the second season. Now I'm trying to think about it. And he has plants. That's weird. He has plants. Because I'm so used to him having like zombies and like stuff like straight out of the Shadow Realm. So yeah, that's goofy. But yeah, again, super appreciate the raid though, bro. And you guys that are viewing, if you guys are super into Magic, this is really what I do. Pure evil, yeah, I mean he is. So if you guys are into Magic the Gathering, this is what I am into. I love Magic the Gathering, particularly Commander. I play Commander on Thursdays. Typically, I stream my Commander games with my play group on Thursdays. And actually this week, definitely swing by. My wife is actually going to be cracking open the red, white, and green deck that came out of the newest set, Streets of New Capenna. She's going to be using that pre-constructed commander deck, and I will also be using a pre-constructed commander deck. But I don't know which one I'm going to use yet. I'm either going to use the red, white, black one again, or not red, white, black. I'm sorry, the red, blue, black one, or the blue, white, green one from that set. And then we're going to go against a couple of our other friends that are going to have low power decks too. I think one of them actually still has like an Ikoria precon put together. And so we might do just a straight up like precon out of the box game, which would be kind of cool. Because like, yeah, a couple of my buddies, they do have all the cards for the pre-constructed deck. They just don't have it together right now. But they'll have it put together by the time we try to do it, and that'll actually be a lot of fun because it'll actually be, pretty for the most part, a decent playing field. We'll see how that goes. Okay. Anyways, going back to Jace. So we're in the middle of our card draw slots right now, and Jace is I consider him one of my card draw spells in this deck where he's just he does draw me at least one card a turn. But he has that accessibility to be able to bounce a creature back to the hand and then make it harder for our opponents to play, and hopefully we can outvalue them even further and get to the point where we can end the game before they do have a chance to respond with something. The next card I put in here is my card draw. Let's go up here. It is Chulane. Chulane, Teller of Tales. So 2 Bant, human druid, 2 and a 4. We got Vigilance, which means that if he were to attack, that he doesn't tap. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card, then may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Again, doing this, you're seeing some of the pieces come together here. Like, whenever we do something, we get to do something else. That's what we want to do. And Chulane also gets 3 in a tap, and we can return a target creature to our hand. So that way we can continue to further that value. Particularly with this is good with our cantrippy ones. Yeah, Chulane, so I've never played against a Chulane deck, but I imagine it goes bonkers really fast. But that's why he's also in here, because I know he's a good value piece. The next one I've got is Garruk, Color of Beasts. So Garruk is kind of a win more card, to be honest. But I do have him in my card draw slot because he, for his +1, you reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and then put all creature cards revealed this way into your hand. So you potentially we get 1, 2, 5. I've never actually pulled 5 creatures straight off the top, but I'm hitting about 3. So, Garruk's pretty decent in that case. Then for 3, we can put a green creature card from our hand onto the battlefield so we can cheat something out. And then the -7 is super fun. The -7 will hopefully end the game soon. So we get an emblem with, whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a creature card and put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So hopefully, if not that turn, the next turn, we will be able to end the game with some of our haymakers that we've thrown in here. The next one is Zendikar's Resurgent. So Zendikar's Resurgent, I do have it as a card draw because, again, whenever we cast a creature spell, it triggers and we get to draw a card. And then this is another one that actually kind of overlaps into our mana a little bit too. Whenever we tap a land for mana, then we can add an additional mana of whatever color that land produced. Or just mana, so even if we tap it for colorless, we get an additional colorless mana. The next one is our blue, our big boy blue. That's Nezahal, the Primal Tide, so another one of our no max hand size cards. So we've got, I think this is our 4th one, and this might actually be our last no max hand size card for this deck. Still decent. So 5 blue for a 7/7 Elder Dinosaur. Nezahal, the Primal Tide, can't be countered. Always great. No max hand size. Then whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. So it's okay. It's hit and miss. You're gonna have opponents that will cast some non-creature spells in order to ramp. You'll also have some non-creature spells for like people that need to play removal, unless it's a creature with flash. But whatever. So regardless, Nezahal is still very good at what he does, and we can at least cash in on whatever they do. We get to draw a card off of it at least as well. And then he has this little protection clause where you discard 3 cards, you exile it, and then you return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. I use Nezahal in my Satoru Umezawa deck. Yep. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, Satoru, yeah, he's a new one out of the Kamigawa. Yep. Whenever you so do you ninjutsu him in? That'd be crazy. Each creature card, yes, because he gives it ninjutsu. Oh, that's insane. That's it. You ninjutsu a freaking Nezahal. Oh my gosh. Your playgroup must love you. He just puts a smiley face. Okay. Next card draw spell. No, actually, that's it. That's all of our card draws. So next we're going to go into our removal suite. Our removal suite's pretty simple. We've got 3 things that hit creatures, 3 things that hit artifacts and enchantments, and we've got 2 board wipes in here. So, Path to Exile, super efficient, exile target creature, then the controller gets to search for a basic land. Same thing for Swords to Plowshares, super efficient, exile target creature, then they gain life equal to the power. Nature's Claim, again, super efficient, destroy target artifact or enchantment, it gains 4 life. Then we got Return to Nature for 1 and a blue, or 1 and a green, almost a blue. I play it at the store. It's pretty meh. Well, I mean, the fact that you can like you basically cheat the mana cost of Nezahal because he's 7, right? And then you get to ninjutsu him in for 4. I mean, I'd take that any day of the week. I'm guessing you're saying that your deck as a whole is kind of meh, which I mean, that's just how you build your decks, bro. I mean, it's if you build it kind of like a mid range. I don't want to use incorrect terminology here. Hold on. If you build it to be kind of a middle of the road deck, then I mean, yeah, I mean it is what it is, and sometimes that's not a bad thing, you know. If you're playing that with, especially some other guys that you have, if you don't know those people, right, and you play against them, you have no idea how salty they can be. I mean, it's a thing. Salt's real. So, okay, Return to Nature. So we get to choose one: destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. I don't typically use the graveyard hate part. Typically it does end up being something that's on the field. Not to say that I haven't used that part before, because I have a couple of times, but more often than not, I'm getting rid of something that's on the battlefield. And then I've got one that's not super efficient, but I think that it'll work in this deck. So we've got Knight of Autumn, and it's 1 a green and a white for a Dryad Knight 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, we get to choose one. We either gain 4 life, we get to put 2+1/+1 counters on Knight of Autumn, or we get to destroy an artifact or enchantment. I think, given the reason why it's in here is, right, to destroy the artifact or enchantment, but we do have things that help bounce our creatures back to our hand and then replay, so we get to utilize it for more value should we need it. The next card we've got, this is our mass removal here. So we've got, it's a sorcery, Celestial Judgment. So for each creature, for each different power among creatures on the battlefield, choose a creature with that power, destroy each creature not chosen this way. So because our deck is going to have different creatures with different powers and all these +1/+1 counters floating around, also, more than likely, we are going to be able to have a much bigger board than the rest of our opponents by the time this thing resolves. That's why I decided to go with this. And actually, this comes out of the human tribal deck that's in it was the pre-constructed deck for Midnight Hunt. Yeah, it's the Innistrad block, so Midnight Hunt. This comes out of that human tribal deck, and this is actually super good. Given that deck actually revolves around that keyword Coven, which is exactly what that does. It puts +1/+1 counters on stuff, and it wants to have different creatures with different powers on purpose. But this deck, we don't necessarily do it on purpose, but we just innately have different creatures with different powers, so we're trying to make sure that we maintain that as much as possible. And then we've got everyone's favorite, Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift we keep in here because, especially if we want to end the game. Now, given, like, if we have an opponent that's just, like, way too powerful, they've gotten way too big, and they're trying to come at us, immediately I'm going to put a Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift is the bane of, I'm sure, most play groups, and it's actually why I put at a minimum, I have 2 counter spells of some sort, or 2 instants of some sort that get around Cyclonic Rift to protect my board in every single deck, because Cyclonic Rift is such a crazy card that you need to be able to have ways to get around it, so that way you're not left at a complete disadvantage. For the person who has Cyclonic Rift, you want to play this at the most opportune time. And if you're trying to end the game, the most opportune time is at the end of your opponent's turn, right before it goes into your turn, because then the board will be completely clear as long as nobody countered it. The next is, we're going to go into our protection suite. Ow. Oh, wow. I actually took that card out of this deck and I didn't realize it. So I actually don't have Heroic Intervention in here anymore. But I do realize that I do have a card in here on Breakable Formation. I actually have this card in here instead. Probably will get might get a Heroic Intervention again at some point in the future, but I think I like the idea of Unbreakable Formation because it still gives my creatures indestructible until end of turn, and then if I play this during my main phase, I can put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. I think that's really why I kind of liked the idea of Unbreakable Formation, because I can use it as... I feel like I don't have to save it. I feel like I could use it as a protection spell, or I could use it as another, like, finisher. Even though it only gives us one +1/+1 counter, but the vigilance is nice. We've got Arcane Denial, pretty decent counter spell. 1 in a blue for an instant counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. You draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. So remember, right? They have a May trigger. They don't have to take it. If they forget it, they forget it. And then you have to, because it tells you have to. So you have to draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. Then we've got Lofty Denial, and I think Lofty Denial is perfect in this deck because it's a counter target spell that basically says that they have to pay 4 because Ishai is a flyer, so more than likely they're going to have to pay 4 in order to get their spell around it. And 4 is just a steep cost to pay. More than, like, if your opponent has enough mana to pay for, then they deserve to win, because, like, that's just way too much mana to be, like... Because could you imagine, like, you play, like, a 7-mana beater, like, I'm about to end the game with this thing, and then Lofty Denial, and then they have 4 more mana to still let that thing get through? Like, yeah, they deserve the win at that point. The next thing we've got is artifacts. Swiftfoot Booties. 2 and an equip for 1. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. We've gone over equipment and how equipment work in my Batman deck, so pretty simple though. Equip costs, you can only activate them as a sorcery once they're on the battlefield. If your creature dies, then the artifact equipment does not die. They just simply fall off of the creature, and then you can re-equip it to another creature during your turn. Then we also have, let's go back up here, Shalai, the Voice of Plenty. So Shalai is great. We've got 3 and a white for a 3/4 flying. You, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control have hexproof. And then we can pay 4 green to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So as you've noticed, like, this deck does, especially over this protection suite, we have a lot of protection cards in here because we want to keep as many of our value pieces on board as much as possible. That being said, Bant is innately good at creating what I call the immortal board state. In Magic, there are ways to get around just about everything, right? But Bant does a pretty good job of making sure that your pieces stay on the board for as long as possible if you could get it. So there's so many ways to get hexproof on all your stuff, indestructible on all your stuff, and ways to counter spells and away from you, so that way there's no possible way that your opponent can touch your board if you really want to build it that way. This deck has a pretty good, it is pretty decent at keeping all of its pieces on the board. Not to say that it's perfect, because, I mean, you know, your play group gets used to playing against your deck so many times they find ways around your stuff, but it does a pretty decent job at doing it. Then the next thing that we've got to overlap, because Shalai, remember Shalai herself, she does not get hexproof, but we have Sereth, the Viper's Fang, which kind of helps us with that. So Sereth, the Viper's Fang, is 2 green for a human warlock 3/4. Other tapped creatures you control have Death Touch. Other untapped creatures you control have hexproof. And then we can pay 1, tap, and then untap another target creature or land you control. So Shalai and Sereth overlap perfectly because we can just leave Shalai untapped and not even attack with her if we really don't want to, and then Sereth just keeps her Sereth actually keeps the hexproof on her, and Shalai puts the hexproof on literally everything else. Then we have Sigarda. Sigarda, Host of Herons, is awesome. 2 green, white, white for a Angel 5/5 flying and hexproof, so it already has a hexproof innately. And then spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. Sigarda was put into this deck specifically because at the time in my playgroup I had a guy that that mopped us completely with an Animar deck that was Eldrazi tribal, basically. He'd come in there with all these freaking Annihilator nonsense, and I just had enough. So I decided to put Sigarda in there, and ever since then, Sigarda has been a great boon to this deck. And on top of that, Sigarda is just actually is good anyway going against black decks, because black decks do a similar thing. They can they'll try to control the board, and like particularly with my Marion deck, which does exactly that. So Sigarda is really good against decks that are like that too. And then we have our big white beater, which is Avacyn, Angel of Hope. Pretty popular card. 5 white, white, white for a legendary creature angel. 8/8 flying, vigilance, and indestructible. Other permanents you control have indestructible. So again, we have a massive way to protect our board state as much as possible. Our quote-unquote recursion spells, we don't have that many. Being that we do have a really robust protection suite, I decided to kind of go a little bit short on the recursion suite, but still just wanted to put in cards that I felt that mattered. So 1, regrowth, because it's efficient, at 2 mana. 1 and a green to return target card from our graveyard to our hand. Pretty similar thing with Eternal Witness. It's just a creature that does the same thing. Eternal Witness, 1 green for a 2/1 human shaman. When it enters the battlefield, return target card from our graveyard to our hand. And then being that it's a creature, we can also potentially bounce it and then, continue to gain value that way. Bow of Nilia. Bow of Nilia is an enchantment artifact from the first Theros set. Where'd it go? Where does it actually... Okay, so it's probably in the artifacts. Yeah, because I guess it sees the artifact super type first. Okay, so 1 green for legendary enchantment artifact. Attacking creatures you control have death touch. Just another way to get some evasion in there. And then we had 1 and a green. I was going to say 2 mana, and I put them both together. Whatever. Tap. Choose 1. Put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature, or Bow of Nilia deals 2 damage to a target creature with flying, or you gain 3 life, or put up to 4 target cards from your graveyard onto the bottom of your library. I put this card in the slot of recursion because mainly it does have that innate ability to do that, but we can also put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature we control. Mainly, the ones that care about it, like our commander, because we want our commander to be huge, or we can put it on something like Incubation Druid. Pretty easy. And then the last one that we've got... Where is it? Sorcery. Primal Command. So Primal Command, this is actually not the version of Primal Command I have in here. The version of Primal Command I have in here is actually the promo version of it that they have in that they had in Strixhaven. Actually, hold on. Let me see if I can pull it up. Oh, maybe if I can spell it right here. Hold on. That one. Yeah, that's the one I actually have right here. I don't know if y'all can see that. It might the camera might flicker on and off, but yeah. So, yeah. So 3 green for choose 2. Target player gains 7 life, and then put target non-creature permanent on the top of its owner's library. Which right? Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library. Now this is why it's a recursion spell, right? And then search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And then this is why I also consider it one of my tutors, sort of, right? Because it's mainly in here for the recursion spell, but I can also tutor for a creature card that I need. Now, the fun thing about the command cards in general, right? When you cast it, you choose 2 modes, but they resolve in that order, right? So if I chose, and so when I choose, and I do, typically I will choose the target player shuffles their graveyard into the library, so me, I'll shuffle the graveyard into my library, and then after that has shuffled, I can then search my library for a creature card and put it into my hand. So if there's a creature card that's in my graveyard that I need, I can simply tutor for that creature and then shuffle my library. Super cool. I wanted to make sure I looked it up like a while ago to make sure that that is actually a thing. Like I could legally do that, and yes, it does. They have to. Whatever mode you choose, they resolve in that order first. So, and that goes, like I said, for all of the commands that are out there, like Incendiary, Cryptic, which is the blue one. Incendiary is the red one. Now I'm trying to think, which one is the white one? Is Austere command, right? That's the one that like you can choose the board wipe. You know, pick your board wipe, I guess, build your own board wipe, and then what's the profane command? I think is the black one. Yeah, I think profane command is the black one. I don't remember everything that profane command does. I don't typically like to use profane command because it's just I found in my black decks it doesn't really do that well, I guess. I don't know. Okay. So the other sort of tutor card that we've gotten here is, let's see, where did I put it? Aha! Knight of the Reliquary. So Knight of the Reliquary, like I said, is a sort of tutor. It's a 1 green white 2/2 for a human knight. For each land card in your graveyard, he gets +1/+1, and then you can tap, sacrifice a forest or plains, and then you search your library for a land, so any land, and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So this is why I consider this one like a sort of tutor, because like if I want to just get additional land triggers, I just get additional land triggers. But if I'm trying to get to Kodama to start popping off at the end of the game, then I can go get one of my bounce lands specifically and then put that into the battlefield. So that's why I consider it a sort of tutor. And then, so some additional value pieces that we've got here. Okay, so we've got Ramanop Excavator. You can play land cards from your graveyard. That actually ties right into Knight of the Reliquary, right? If we sacrifice lands, then we can just put those lands right back into the battlefield if we haven't played a land that turn. It also can... Oh, wow. We got a big old thunderstorm going on right now. So it also plays into our Fetchlands. So whenever we sacrifice a fetch land, if we haven't played another land that turn, we can just pull that land back out of the graveyard, sacrifice it again, and get another land out of our library. Another one is Evolution Sage, right? So whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we proliferate, so we can increase the number of counters on permanents or players, and give another counter of that type. Definitely we're going to be pumping up our commander and potentially other creatures that we have with +1/+1 counters on them. Then I talked about Viral of the Whole Clade earlier, right? We want to double the stuff. It says that it has to be on an artifact, creature, or land, so obviously doubling our creatures, no problem. I love Evolution Sage. Yeah, Evolution Sage is great. The best Evolution Sage I've ever seen is actually in my buddy's Sisay deck, because he has a Sisay Super Friends, and that thing just goes insane. So Vorel of the Whole Clade, yeah, that's so. Like I said, that's why we have that's why we like to use the Liquid Metal Torque, so that way we can turn something into an artifact to put more counters on it should we need to. Creatures, obviously, we're not going to have a problem with that. Lands, more than likely, we're not going to have counters on them. Though I get that there are lands with counters on them that exist, and you can definitely use that if you so choose, but I just don't have those lands in this deck. And then we have Karametra. Where is she? There she is. Karametra, 3 green and a white for a 6/7 legendary enchantment creature, God Indestructible. Has the devotion thing, so it has to have green and white that is up to 7 in order for her to be a creature. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, You may search your library for a forest or plains card, put it into the battlefield, taps it, and stuff your library. So now you see exactly more and more things. You see why I really care about having the land subtypes on there. And then the last one in this category is the Nissa Steward of Elements. Nissa Steward of Elements is in this deck kind of for a nostalgia reason. It's like a pet card, sort of. Because Amonkhet was actually the first set I had actually came into Magic on. So this was back in 2017 when I first started playing Commander. My buddies at work actually introduced me to Commander, and I didn't pull her from a pack, but I did when I started looking up the spoilers and stuff that were going to be in this set. I really wanted this Nissa. Super cool thing though, when we did go to the pre-release, my other buddy that was there with us, he had won a significant number of games. I think he was even second place that night, and he got some packs for winning, or at least up to that point. And he had actually pulled a foil Nissa Steward of the Elements, so that was actually super cool. But in any case, Nissa is in here as another value piece because one, we get to scry to, so we get to shuffle away some of the stuff that we don't want on the top of our library. It's super nice that she has X, so she can come in super cheap. Actually, oftentimes, I will just play 3 for her. So I'll pay 1 and then a blue and a green for her to come into the battlefield, and then I'll use the scry 2 immediately, and then she's up to 3 loyalty, and people don't typically mess with her, so I just continue to pump her up. Well, when I pump her up to 8, usually after that I don't really need to use the scry 2 anymore because I'll just use the 0. I'll look at the top card of my library. If it's a land or a creature card with CMC less than the equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, then I can put that card onto the battlefield. So that's another way to cheat our big bad guys into the battlefield without having to pay anything, which is super awesome. And then this -6, untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands. I won't say I've never used this, but I hardly ever use it. I think only one time in recent memory I can say that I've used that because the rest of the time I'm just trying to be able to crap stuff off the top of my library, honestly. The next thing that we've got is some stuffs that put +1/+1 counters on stuff. So we've got Citadel Siege. When it enters the battlefield, you choose cons or dragons. We almost always choose cons. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Dragons, at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, tap target creature that player controls. Now, while that's great combat shenanigans, because that part doesn't actually feed into our strategy that we're trying to put +1/+1 counters on our commander as much as possible, or on other creatures that we want to pump up, I just typically forego the dragons part every time. The other cool one is actually Retreat to Kazandu. So it has a landfall trigger. 2 and a green for landfall. And then when a land enters, we can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or we can gain 2 life. That's actually going to synergize really well with the card that we have in here that I'll show in a little bit. Cathars Crusade. I almost said Cathars Crusade. Cathars Crusade. 3 white for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Cathars Crusade is known to get out of control, so definitely had to put it in this deck. And this is actually one of the first cards that I upgraded this deck with when I was doing my initial build, when I had shifted it from just being a Simic deck to a Bant deck. A Simic meaning that it's green and blue, for those of you that don't know what that means. And then the last card that he's not really, he's kind of in his own category just because he kind of spreads the love. I guess he could go into the value thing, but he doesn't really like add additional card advantage. But we have Odric. So for stuff that has some keywords, we can spread the keyword love around. I mean, we do have things in here with flying. We don't have a whole lot with First Strike. We do cards that have Death Touch, give it to everything already. don't have much with the double strike, but haste we can spread, hexproof we can spread, indestructible we can spread, lifelink I think we have lifelink in here. We can spread. Yeah, no, we do. And then we don't have menace. We do have reach. We don't have skulk. We have trample and we have vigilance. So most of those, about 80%, 75% of those keywords, we can spread the love around with all of our creatures and make them big and scary. And then we do run Archangel of Thune, which is great. Like I said, good synergy with our other landfall card that we talked about just a minute ago. For some reason, the name escapes me. Retreat to Kazandu, yeah. So if we have Retreat to Kazandu, that just puts a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. Instead, with the Archangel of Thune, we can gain 2 life, and then we put +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, which is awesome. Let me go back to it. Archangel of Thune, flying lifelink, 3/4. For whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Yeah, so we shifted to gaining life, and then because we gain life, we get to put +1/+1 counters on everything. Another card that I don't believe I mentioned earlier for some reason for my card draw is Drug Skull Reaver. I think he got stuck behind something, so let me go back to that real quick. So Drug Skull Reaver is actually another reason why I put Archangel of Thune in this deck. Because he's, so we do have Double Striker. He's our Double Striker. So flying, Double Strike, Lifelink, whenever you gain life, draw a card. So he's another one that we have that kind of goes with our Archangel of Thune. And he also goes with our Retreat to Kazandu. Because we're gaining the life by playing a land. Then we get to draw a card also. And then, now, caution. I am Johnny Combo. So we do have a Spike Feeder in this deck. Initially, I actually was not going to put a Spike Feeder in this deck and do the infinite counters and infinite life thing, but I decided that after, I think this was the card I had actually filled in because I didn't need to have a ramp spell and a liquid metal coating anymore, so that opened the gap, and I was like, well, I might as well put Spike Feeder in there. Because it's just going to make my creatures infinitely big and give me infinite life anyway. So, now given, like I said, I don't necessarily tutor for Spike Feeder every time. But if I am trying to end the game, if I'm at that point, then yeah, I think that's not a bad one to tutor for. So the 2 cards in here that we really want, though, to combo off with our Kodama, those are going to be Tireless Tracker and Tireless Provisioner, which are fantastic. So remember I was telling you that because of the trigger that Kodama has, we have to have another permanent enter the battlefield that isn't a ability of Kodama's in order for the train to keep going and going and going and going with our bounce lands, right? Well, that's exactly what Tireless Tracker and Tireless Provisioner do. Now, with Tireless Tracker, we create the clue tokens, and then whenever we sacrifice clue, he gets +1/+1 counter. And it triggers for every time a land enters, which is perfect. Same thing with Tireless Provisioner, we get a food token or a treasure token. Now, that being said, if we have the Tireless Tracker, we can, we can potentially draw a bajillion cards with our clue tokens to get whatever we need to end the game. Whatever our big finisher needs to be, whether that's Odric, whether that's the Spike Feeder to make our creatures huge, whatever it is that we need to dig into our deck for so that way we can end the game, this is what we're going to do. That being said, too, with the landfall triggers, it's perfect because we can create the food token or treasure tokens. More than likely, we'll create the treasure tokens and then immediately sacrifice those treasure tokens into Tireless Tracker's clue tokens so that way we can draw all those cards. And then also, if we don't have access to Tireless Provisioner at the time, we do kind of double down with Lotus Cobra because now we have we still get the mana for the land entering the battlefield of any color. It's just not going to create a token in that case. But if we already have the Tireless Tracker on the battlefield, we don't really care about that because the tracker is the one that's creating the tokens that allows us the loop to continue over and over and over again. And that is the deck, friends. This is super fun. I this deck is, like I said, it's one of those decks that sneaks up on the opponents and kind of just wins out of nowhere. But like the crazy thing is that if you're really paying attention, you can see it coming. You see the pieces that I put down, and then you'll understand that, oh, this actually triggers that thing, and this thing triggers that thing. I will not lie to you. There have been plenty of times that I have missed triggers because there is so much that was going on my board state. But the end result typically is my board is huge, my board is protected, and I'm going to swing out with a whole bunch of beefy creatures. So I do hope that you enjoyed this Decksplaination for my Ishai and Kodama. It is super fun. I actually might do this deck again at some point in the future with some of the cards that came out in the new Capenna set that deal with some counter stuff that are actually in these colors. And they actually seem pretty interesting, and I might play around with them a little bit and see which ones actually fit a little bit better into this deck strategy and see how that goes. We'll see. I don't know yet. We'll, do some test drives and see how that goes, and if we like it, we like it. If we don't, we don't. And then I'll do another Decksplaination on, I'm sure, sometime in the future if I do make changes. Alright, guys, I appreciate you guys stopping by. It's been super fun. Tomorrow, I am going to be doing a live deck build, or rather, a deck upgrade of the Obscura Precon, which is the Streets of New Capenna, the blue, white, black one. That's the one that really goes into the connives mechanic. And I'm going to do a live deck build of that one, because that's the one that I think that my dad actually would enjoy the most playing Magic with, if he was ever to play Magic with me and my brother. I'm sure I can build them decks and then we can all play together, kind of like we did back in the day with Yu-Gi-Oh. But they're just their style of how like sneaky they are, and they're kind of like a cabal amongst themselves, at least according to the lore. That particular crime family is very secretive in the lore of the Streets of New Capenna, and it's kind of interesting. I don't delve typically too far into the lore as some other people do, but I do find it kind of fun when they do stuff like that to really make the world come more alive, as it were. So, in any case, tune in tomorrow for that if you love to see that. And then Thursday, like I said, we're going to be doing a pre-con play. Potentially, or at the very least, a low power commander play where we have my wife and I will be using the precons from New Capenna, and we will be facing two guys in our play group that have either low power decks or precons themselves. Hopefully, they do have their precons available. We'll see when we get there. All right, guys. If you guys don't already, please go find me on Facebook and Twitter. I am on there. I'm posting just about every day. I post on there with different stuffs, and I also post typically my schedule is going to be on one of those places. And also on YouTube, I do push these videos to YouTube typically after these are done within the next day or so. So please, if you haven't seen this here, go over there, or encourage your friends or whatever to check me out if you guys are super into Magic and would like to get some tips and stuff. Comment on my videos and stuff. I have no problem. Or even just on Twitter or Facebook, actually. That's probably the best place to do it. You find me out there. I can answer questions on like how I decide to go through my deck builds and exactly what I'm looking for with what specific commander and whatever else. So, yeah. And if you guys want to do a spell table game at some point, just reach out. I'd love to have you guys on to play some games. I'm all about playing some Commander and reaching out to the Commander community when I can. So, super appreciate it, guys. It is getting late. I do have to go to work tomorrow, so I will see you all later. Much love, and I will see y'all tomorrow.